have virtue on your complaints." "I haven't any complaints, Jerry," I said. "It's only to please Sissy." "I know that as well as you do, dearie," he said, and that was all that came of my going to give him a flogging. I wonder whether he made poor Troubadour shy when I lashed at him. Jerry has his ways of getting even with people. "I wonder," said Una. "Well, did you try the charm? Did it work?" "What nonsense! I told René about it, of course, because he's a doctor. He's going to be a most famous doctor. That's why our doctor hates him. René said, 'Oh, your Master Gam, he is worth knowing.' And he put up his eyebrows, like this. He made joke of it all. He can see my window from the carpenter shed where he works, and if ever the maple stick fell down, he pretended to be in a fearful taking till I propped the window up again. He used to ask me whether I had said my apostles properly, and how I took my deep breaths. Oh yes, and the next day, though he had been there ever so many times before, he put on his new hat and paid Jerry Gam a visit of state, as a fellow physician. Jerry never guessed René was making fun of him, and so he told René about the sick people in the village and how he cured them with herbs after Dr. Brake had given them up. Jerry could talk smuggler's French, of course, and I had taught René plenty of English, if only he wasn't so shy. They called each other Monsieur Gam and Monsieur Lenark, just like gentlemen. I suppose it amused poor René. He hasn't much to do, except to fiddle about in the carpenter shop. He's like all the French prisoners, always making knick-knacks. And Jerry had a little lathe at his cottage, and so René took to being with Jerry much more than I approved of. The hall is so big and empty when Dad's away, and I will not sit with old Amour. She talks so horridly about everyone, especially about René. I was rude to René, I'm afraid, but I was properly served out for it. One always is. You see, Dad went down to Hastings to pay his respects to the general who commanded the brigade there, and to bring him to the hall afterwards. Dad told me he was a very brave soldier from India. He was colonel of Dad's regiment, the 33rd Foot, after Dad left the army, and then he changed his name from Wesley to Wellesley, or else the other way about. And Dad said I was to get out all the silver for him, and I knew that meant a big dinner. So I went down to the sea for early mackerel, and had such a morning in the kitchen and the storerooms. Old Amour nearly cried. However, my dear, I made all my preparations in ample time, but the fish didn't arrive. It never does. And I wanted René to ride to Pevensey and bring it himself. He had gone over to Jerry, of course, as he always used, unless I requested his presence beforehand. I can't send for René every time I want him. He should be there. Now, don't you ever do what I did, child, because it's in the highest degree unladylike, but one of our woods runs up to Jerry's garden, and if you climb, it's ungenteel, but I can climb like a kitten. There's an old hollow oak just above the pigsty where you can hear and see everything below. Truthfully, I only went to tell René about the mackerel, but I saw him and Jerry sitting on the seat playing with wooden toy trumpets. So I slipped into the hollow and choked down my cough and listened. René had never shown me any of these trumpets. "Trumpets? Aren't you too old for trumpets?" said Una. They weren't real trumpets, because Jerry opened his shirt collar, and René put one end of his trumpet against Jerry's chest, and put his ear to the other. Then Jerry put his trumpet against René's chest and listened, while René breathed and coughed. I was afraid I would cough too. "This Hollywood one is the best," said Jerry. "'Tis wonderful, like hearing a man's soul whisperin' in his innards. But unless I've a buzzin' in my ears, Monsieur Lenark, you make much about the same kind of noises as old Gaffer Macklin, but not quite so loud as young Hopper. It sounds like breakers on a reef, a long way off. Comprenny?" "Perfectly," said René. "I drive on the breakers. But before I strike, I shall save hundreds, thousands, millions perhaps, by my little trumpets. Now tell me what sounds the old Gaffer Macklin have made in his chest, and what the young copper also." Jerry talked for nearly a quarter of an hour about sick people in the village, while Renee asked questions. Then he sighed and said, "You explain very well, Monsieur Gam, but if only I had your opportunities to listen for myself, do you think these poor people would let me listen to them through my trumpet, for a little money? No? Renee's as poor as a church mouse."
"They'd kill you, monsieur. It's all I can do to coax 'em to abide it, and I'm Jerry Gam,"
said Jerry. He's very proud of his attainments. "Then these poor people are alarmed, no?" said Renee.
"They've had it in at me for some time back because of my trying your trumpets on their sick, and I reckon by the talk at the alehouse they won't stand much more. Tom Dunch and some of his kidney was drinking themselves riot ripe when I passed along afternoon. Charms and mutterins and bits of red wool and black hens is in the way of nature to these fools, monsieur, but anything likely to do 'em real service is devil's work by their estimation. If I was you, I'd go home before they come."
Jerry spoke quite quietly, and Renee shrugged his shoulders.
"I am prisoner on parole, Monsieur Gam," he said. "I have no home."
Now that was unkind of Renee. He's often told me that he looked on England as his home. I suppose it's French politeness.
"Then we'll talk of something that matters," said Jerry. "Not to name no names, Monsieur Lanark, but what might be your own opinion, someone who ain't old Gaffer Macklin nor young Copper, is that person better or worse?"
"Better, for time, that is," said Renee. He meant for the time being, but I never could teach him some phrases.
"I thought so too," said Jerry. "But how about time to come?"
Renee shook his head, and then he blew his nose. You don't know how odd a man looks blowing his nose when you are sitting directly above him.
"I've thought that too," said Jerry.
He rumbled so deep I could scarcely catch.
"It don't make much odds to me, because I'm old. But you're young, monsieur. You're young."
And he put his hand on Renee's knee, and Renee covered it with his hand. I didn't know they were such friends.
"Thank you, mon ami," said Renee. "I am much obliged. Let us return to our trumpet making. But I forget." He stood up. "It appears that you received this afternoon."
You can't see into Gam's Lane from the oak, but the gate opened, and fat little Dr. Brake stumped in, mopping his head, and half a dozen of our people following him, very drunk. You ought to have seen Renee bow. He does it beautifully.
"A word with you, Lineck," said Dr. Brake. "Jerry has been practicing some devilry or other on these poor wretches, and they've asked me to be arbiter." "Whatever that means, I reckon it's safer than asking you to be doctor," said Jerry, and Tom Dunch, one of our carters, laughed. "That ain't right feeling of you, Tom," Jerry said, "seeing how clever Dr. Brake put away your thorn in the flesh last winter." Tom's wife had died at Christmas, though Dr. Brake bled her twice a week. Dr. Brake danced with rage. "This is all beside the mark," he said. "These good people are willing to testify that you've been impudently prying into God's secrets by means of some papistical contrivance, which this person," he pointed to poor Renee, "has furnished you with. Why, here are the things themselves." Renee was holding a trumpet in his hand. Then all the men talked at once. They said old Gaffer Macklin was dying from stitches in his side where Jerry had put the trumpet. They called it the devil's earpiece. And they said it left round red witch marks on people's skins and dried up their lights and made 'em spit blood and threw 'em into sweats. Terrible things, they said. You never heard such a noise. I took advantage of it to cough. Renee and Jerry were standing with their backs to the pigsty. Jerry fumbled in his big flat pockets and fished up a pair of pistols. You ought to have seen the men give back when he cocked his. He passed one to Renee. "Wait, wait!"
said Renee. "I will explain to the doctor, if he permits."